He's made millions, recently sold more books in a single day than anyone except J.K. Rowling, was once all in with Jesus, and is now a nihilist. Is there anything we can learn from him? Hi, I'm Darren from 12 Church. This is a little bit different set than you might be used to, a little bit different kind of topic, but one that I think is important. A clip of Alex Hormozi from an Iced Coffee Hour podcast a few years ago recently resurfaced. I think it was re-uploaded. And in this clip, Alex explains why he left Christianity after being all in. And by all in, I mean baptized, excited, studying apologetics, the whole 9 yards. In case you don't know who Alex is, he was a gym owner, started several gyms, and then he started and sold a big business called Gym Launch that helped others build gyms. He and his wife Layla currently lead at acquisition.com, which seeks to acquire other businesses and increase their income and their value. A few weeks ago, he did a telethon-style book launch, a long live stream, in which he sold more copies of his book, $100 Million Money Models, than any other book ever sold in 24 hours, except for a few of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. He's a brilliant marketer, a very hard worker, and has a certain type of practical wisdom that's clearly been informed by biblical principles. And I'm going to say it up front, that I'm definitely a fan. I often listen to his podcast, I bought some of his products, I admire his persistence in whatever he's doing, and his directness about everything, even if I don't agree with him. Now, there have been many videos pumped out recently reacting to his reasons for why he left Christianity. Some are quite good, like one from the What Do You Meme channel, which will be linked here. There are others that are pretty shallow and miss the point. Some of those reacting also don't have any knowledge of Alex apart from the clip they're reacting to, and as a result, they're pretty thin. The essence of his argument against Christianity, as stated in that clip, is that Christianity is about faith versus other religions being about works, which is a good start. He says if works is what saves you, gets you to the good place, is his words, how do you know when you've worked enough? Christianity, in contrast, is about faith. But then he says ultimately it faces the same problem because how do you know if you have enough faith? He says ultimately it boils down to the same problem as works-based religion. How do you know if you have enough? Now that was a surprisingly weak argument against Christianity. It shows both a misunderstanding of faith, a misunderstanding of the way of salvation, and ignores the very real distinction and ultimate proof or not of Christianity versus other religions and philosophies. Yes, faith works as a differentiator, but the resurrection of Jesus is the difference and the ultimate evidence for Christianity. So how would you react to his argument? A little more backstory before I get into what I believe we can learn from him. In another place, I heard him share how he was wrestling with the truth of Christianity or not, and a Christian counselor told him he simply had to make a choice because he was paralyzed. And so he made a choice. And his choice was not Christianity. He became a nihilist. Nothing matters. When you die, there's nothing. You make your own meaning now. In addition to what he shared, like everyone else, he's got a whole lifetime of experiences and highs and lows that all come into play in his beliefs and his actions. So we need to resist getting overly psychological and analyzing what we think is going on in his heart and his mind. I'm pretty sure there are genuine followers of Jesus Christ who know him and love him and are praying for him and are available to him as needed. Another important note is that just a few weeks ago, his mom suddenly, tragically passed away. And he shared a beautiful tribute to her that included these words. She was admitted into the first ever female class at Johns Hopkins, a huge accomplishment because before that it was men only. She ran a private eye surgery practice for years. She went to Africa multiple times to operate on entire villages to literally heal the blind. She helped anyone who didn't have money, despite never having much of her own. She gave her life to Christ when she was 42 and never looked back. She lived in God's grace. She also loved me fiercely despite her difficulty showing it. But she was always proud, always available, always genuine, and truly did not care what anyone thought besides Jesus. Now listen to this. I hope her worldview is right, and she's welcomed home in his arms with a message we'd all want. Well done, my good and faithful servant. I share all of this backstory to make it clear that Alex is not a nasty atheist, an offensive nihilist who wants to discourage and break the faith of others. I'm not sure if it's in the Iced Coffee Hour podcast or somewhere else, but I once heard him say regarding Christianity that he wished he believed it. Now, I'm not going to do a theological rebuttal of what Alex said, other than what I've already said about the differentiator and ultimate proof really being about the resurrection of Jesus. If Jesus got up, every other argument is irrelevant. With all that out of the way, I do want to spend a minute highlighting a couple of things I think Christians can learn from him. Number one is honesty. Whether or not you agree with Alex Hormozi's reasoning about Christianity, I don't believe he's setting up a smokescreen. I don't think he's trying to bury something that he actually believes in Jesus, but simply wants to live differently. Yes, the heart is deceitful above all else. Yours, mine, his. But I have a hard enough time discerning my own motives without trying to interpret someone else's. But from what I've seen, both in this podcast and others, he's simply being honest. And all I've seen and heard from him, he tries to find first principles, focuses on what he sees as true. He quotes scripture explicitly from time to time and often alludes to biblical principles. Here's the issue for us Christians and many churches. Do we allow people to ask tough questions? Do we allow room for doubt? Do we fear comparing Christianity with other religions or philosophies? We tend to be quick, as some of the reactors to his statements about Christianity have done, to decide that someone who knows about Christianity and the Bible but chooses to go another direction is simply hard-hearted. That they know what's right, but they're choosing to suppress it. That's just lazy thinking. Thinking that if someone believes differently than me, they must be morally flawed. We forget that beyond our intellect, there are our experiences and traumas and, most significantly, spiritual realities, spiritual warfare, confusion, and blindness. Sometimes we even forget that people who reject Jesus are not the enemy, but are captives of the enemy. Back to honesty. Are we allowing the people in our churches and small groups and friendship circles to be honest? To share freely where they're really at without fear of condemnation or rejection? I believe we can learn something about honesty from a guy like Alex. Number two, work ethic. The second thing I think we can learn from Alex is work ethic. Alex and his wife work hard. Their work is their life. Not because they need to work, but because that's where they've put their focus. It's what gives them satisfaction. They have more than enough to live as rich people for the rest of their lives. But they want to build a billion-dollar company, and I expect that they will. I heard him tell a story about how they once took a holiday to a nice location, and after a couple of days they missed work so much that they quit the holiday and went home. He's not a big believer in morning routines. He basically just gets up and goes to work. We can learn something from this. Now let me be gentle, but clear. A lot of pastors, ministry workers, Christians, volunteers in churches and ministries work hard. But a lot of pastors and other ministry leaders are slackers. They're sluggards, and I can document that. Their work ethic is such that if they brought the same energy and effort to most other jobs, they'd be fired within the first week. A friend I know left pastoral ministry and got a regular job. Right out of the gate, he had a big complaint. They expect you to work like 8 hours a day. That was his shock. That was his complaint. Which makes you wonder what he was doing for over a decade of church work. What kind of missional energy and effort is formed in people who are part of a church or ministry led by those kinds of people? And here's a question that haunts me. How is it that a guy who's simply trying to build a billion-dollar business that he believes won't matter 1 second after he's died, how is it that he brings more passion and energy and focus to his work than most Christians, whether pastors or others, than most of us bring to joining Jesus on mission? Do we actually believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, the life? Do we actually believe that God created people for relationship with himself, that the relationship is broken, and that Jesus is the only one who can restore it? What is it about my daily or weekly routine, or your routine, that shows we actually believe what we say we believe? Read the New Testament. Jesus worked hard. The apostles worked hard. The early Christians lived all in on mission. It wasn't about retirement or net worth or a bucket list. It was about Jesus. It was about eternity. Does our work ethic, when it comes to the gospel, match that conviction? Charlie Peace was an English burglar and murderer in the 1800s. He was injured in an accident at the age of 14, began a life of crime. On the morning of his execution, Peace ate a hearty breakfast of eggs and salty bacon and calmly awaited the coming of the public executioner, William Marwood, inventor of what's called the long drop. He was escorted on the death walk by the prison chaplain who's reading from the Consolations of Religion about the fires of hell. So imagine that, you're walking to your execution, there's a pastor reading about hell. Peace looked at the chaplain and said, "Sir, if I believe what you in the Church of God say that you believe, even if England were covered with broken glass from coast to coast, I would walk over it, if need be, on hands and knees. And I'd think it worthwhile living just to save one soul from an eternal hell like that." Charlie Peace connected the dots. If we believe what we say we believe, if the eternal destinies of men and women is truly at stake, urgency and focus and a pretty strong work ethic should be a given. Maybe you've picked up on this, but I've been a little irritated by some of the reaction to Alex Hormozi. The psychologizing and the theologizing and the criticizing of his conclusion, even though I also disagree with his conclusions. But perhaps this is a confession, take it as you want. When I want to get motivated about my mission and calling, I generally don't listen to a sermon. I often think of some key passages like Mark chapter 8, where Jesus says, "If anyone wants to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." I think of Paul's words about becoming all things to all men to save some. And I often listen to a short clip of Alex Hormozi. I have several saved, where he talks about focus and energy and motivation. And even though his mission is far different from mine, in some ways antithetical to mine, maybe it's because it's so opposed to mine, I think to myself, if this guy is so fired up about this artificial, temporary construct we call money, maybe I should get off my backside and do something that matters for eternity. I pray for Alex. I have for some time. I prayed for him before I saw this clip. I prayed for him before I heard about his mom passing away. And I often think of him in relation to the words of Jesus, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." So I just want to encourage you to take a moment right now. Pray for him. Pray for Layla. Pray the Lord's Prayer for God's kingdom to come and God's will to be done in and through them. Pray Acts 26:18, that their eyes would be opened. Pray however you're led. I love this guy. His honesty, his work ethic. He motivates me to serve the Lord with focus and passion and integrity. And while he's going one direction, I'm going another. His story isn't over. Neither is mine and neither is yours. The time is coming when every knee will bow on heaven and earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. If we believe that, let's act like it.